Good evening, and welcome to the Miracle of Prosperity here on the New Thought Media Network. I'm your host, Reverend Jim Webb. I'm the author of The Soul of Prosperity, Prosperity from A to Z, The 30 P's of Prosperity, and Create Your Self-Manifesting Vision Board. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here, and I'm here every week at 8 p.m. Eastern on Sundays. And each week, we explore a different dimension of prosperity. For we understand prosperity to be multidimensional. Prosperity is more than just money and stuff. Prosperity may be professional prosperity, where we have a wonderful job with wonderful pay, where we provide a wonderful service in a wonderful way, according to Florence Scovel Shen. Prosperity could be family prosperity, where our families are sources of support and upliftment. Prosperity could be relationship prosperity, where all our relationships are harmonious as an outer reflection of our own inner harmony. Prosperity could be logistical prosperity, where our lives simply work well. So each week, we look at many dimensions of prosperity and we look at tools that we can use to enhance our experience of prosperity. And we look at ways that we can remove the blockages to the prosperity that exists naturally for all of us. And this week is no exception. We're going to work with a hidden tool of prosperity that we have often seen erroneously as a burden or a challenge. The hidden tool to prosperity that we have often seen as a burden or challenge is those things that have triggered us. We're going to talk about triggering your way to prosperity because our triggers are more than just triggers. They're invitations to the growth and healing that can create more prosperity in our lives. For our triggers are the things that become aware to us that block our prosperity. And I've got a very special guest tonight, someone I'm so pleased to invite on the show. And this special guest is someone who has been on the spiritual path for decades, a mystic, a healer, a sage, a minister, a collector of wonderful news, and a purveyor of peace. My special guest tonight is Reverend Jane Batt. She's here to discuss her journey and how being triggered has helped her to create more prosperity. Welcome, Reverend Jane.
Thank you. Glad to be here with you, Reverend Jim.
We are so glad you're here. And I know that you have been working on yourself very ardently for decades. Your self work has involved introspection, personal healing, and using that which has triggered you for your growth. I've observed that many in our spiritual community have observed that. And now it's time for the world to observe that and learn from what you have experienced. So we're glad you're here. Thank you again for being here. So let's talk about
Yes.
triggers. What are some of the key triggers that you've experienced in your life, Reverend Jane?
Well, I'll start with a big one that a lot of humanity shares, and that
Okay.
is family relationships, family dynamics, and patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been taking classes with Reverend Jim. I want everyone to know that one of my sources of insight has been the classes that I've taken with Reverend Jim, and that many years ago, he shared an insight with me that really transformed my family relationships. One in particular, of course, one of the
Tell us
more
about this.
not so easy ones.
Yeah.
And this was a situation where here's someone in my family who seems to always be reflecting to me my doubts. Why can't you just give me encouragement and support and all the positive feedback in the world? No, 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 it has to be the doubts. And of course, I resented that for some decades. And then one night, a turning point in Reverend
Mhm.
Jim's class, where he said to me, "You know, you hired that soul to play the role of your self doubt." It was a very quiet lightning bolt. It went right into my consciousness and turned everything upside down and back to front. But in that moment, hundreds of pounds of resentment fell off of my heart, and mind and
Mm.
consciousness. And I was able to look at that reality in an entirely different way and have that reality be entirely different as long as I hold on to that awareness and that insight and that awareness of my projection onto
Mhm.
another person of my
Mhm.
own attitudes and beliefs. And since then, I found that to be true in many, 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 if not all relationships. That once I track down my projections that have been unconscious, but I can make them conscious if I'm honest with myself, I find freedom and healing after going over a hill of embarrassment, at
Yeah.
recognizing my projections.
Uh-huh.
Suddenly, on the other side, there's freedom, and my heart is lighter, and I can feel love's presence more easily, and all of that. So
Okay.
that has been a big, huge transformation.
Oh, beautiful. Now let's unpack that a little bit more for the audience. And let's unpack it under the premise that a miracle is a shift in perspective. And the title of this show is The Miracle of Prosperity. In other words, how we can shift our perspective to allow more prosperity. So you had a major shift in your perspective. Is that accurate, Reverend Jane?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it was so quiet, you know, and huge at the same time.
Mm. It was like God coming in like a lightning bolt and like a lamb simultaneously. And the shift in your perception was from being a victim, a punching bag, a pincushion for someone else's criticism and judgment, to realizing that this person was a tool, and I mean that in the positive way. This person was a tool for your healing by showing you an outward reflection of your inner consciousness so that you could make the choice for healing. Is that accurate?
Yes, I went from in that relationship from victim to co-creator. It was empowering. Yeah.
Yes. And it was a choice you made. And the reason I want to underline this for our audience is because every aspect of prosperity is a result of a choice that we can make. For our audience, you can choose your prosperity as you choose your perspective. You can choose your prosperity. And if I were a minister doing a sermon right now, I'd have the whole congregation repeat that 3 times. I'd have the whole congregation say, I can choose my prosperity. As I choose my perspective, I can choose my prosperity. So this trigger was a tool for your prosperity. Once you realized what this trigger was and what a gift it was to you. Now tell us, Reverend Jane, how did your family relationships change as a result of this miracle?
Well, mysteriously enough, they have
Mhm.
improved, and it's been a great relief. And there's
Yes.
more, well, because I bring less tension and blame from my side,
Mm.
because I'm more at peace within me and I can just offer more understanding and support. Beautifully enough, I find more of that coming back to me and being reflected to me.
Yes. In other words, a very common metaphysical principle that we easily forget. What you put out is what you get back. And when you put out more trust, more love, more acceptance, more gentleness, that's what you got back. Is that accurate?
It is. It is.
Yes.
And and in line with that, I'm 73 years old, and I
Hmm.
feel my heart is lighter now than it
Hmm.
was in at any previous younger age, which is
Yes.
not something that I ever would have expected, and that the culture does not teach us to expect.
Yes.
And yet it's fully possible as we release
That's the miracle
emotional
of
weight.
prosperity. Absolutely. And quite often you see all these like quizzes from Cosmopolitan or Men's Health magazine, and they say, this is your physical age, but what is this is your chronological age, but what is your physical age? And there's a difference between the two. It sounds to me like your spiritual age is much different than your chronological age as a result. Is that right?
Yes, in fact, I feel more ageless, because
Yes.
sometimes I feel quite young, sometimes I feel like an elder,
Huh?
uh, but it's more fluid and it's more free and it weighs less in my heart chakra.
Mm. And that's the miracle of prosperity. So I'd like to drill down on something else that you alluded to, Reverend Jane, and that was your release. Now, one of the things we talk about a lot is release. Now, we know there are certain new age buzzwords like releasing your baggage, etc., 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 releasing old ideas so new thoughts and new truth can flow in, etc. Can you tell us more about the role of release as you are triggered, and why is release so important?
Yes, I've used different kinds of release since I started learning about them in the 1970s. And I
Hmm.
really attribute my level of well being at the age of 73 and the way my heart feels lighter now than when I was younger, partly to those ways of releasing. And uh, decades ago, it used to be more of the heavy duty releasing, like stamping my feet and pounding pillows and yelling into pillows and uh, arguing with the universe really loudly on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And 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 I started out learning about release as this heavy duty emotional release, crying, sobbing, pounding, and that was all very useful. It was very helpful to release tension and to release pain. And then later I came to recognize that laughter, singing, dancing, chanting, and then I got into yoga and recognized that breathing, especially in deep ways, and hugging trees.
Hmm.
And then more recently, in one of your classes, you were teaching us about emotional freedom technique, tapping. And that is much more subtle and yet deeply effective.
Hmm.
And all of this is in the service of opening to love's presence, which is in us, but buried under pain and stress. And then also, there are ways that we can receive help with emotional release as practices like therapeutic massage and shiatsu. And I just must mention a wonderful shiatsu practitioner who gave me a session last week. Her name is Soo Young Kim, Sooyongkim. Her website is www.suyoungkim.com, and that is a Japanese form of acupressure. It's like acupuncture without needles. It's acupressure. By releasing tension from muscles, you release old emotion and energy blockages. So nowadays there are many, many, many approaches, and they're all helpful to
Hmm.
different people at different times. And I strongly recommend exploring them.
Oh, wonderful, Reverend Jane. So, for our viewers, can you then explain the power and importance of emotional release in allowing more prosperity?
Mm. Because if I'm tense and closed up around old pain, I'm unable to even perceive potential good coming to me and potential good that I have to offer in the world. I don't even perceive potential joy because I'm absorbed in old pain. But if I use these many techniques of letting go of that, I discover that underneath that old pain, in my core, in my heart, there is love and joy, just naturally bubbling up there. You don't have to make it or, search for it. It's just there. And that also helps me to recognize love's presence in the world, love's presence in other people. It helps me open to a perspective that includes more and more of love's presence.
Hmm. So, in other words, many of the negative and destructive emotions that come about as we are triggered cover over our true essence as love. And when we are triggered and when we release that which triggers us into release, we rediscover our true selves, our authentic selves, our essence. And our essence is love. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And all spiritual traditions talk about our essence, or many, many talk about our essence as love. And they say God is love and God is everywhere. But all too often, this can become an abstract, uh, not visceral, not felt experience that can just make us feel even more frustrated. Like, well, if there's all this God within and God is love, gosh darn it, why am I not feeling it? Well,
Yes.
it's like emotional release is a missing piece, a missing link to
Yes.
connect us with feeling God within, feeling
Hmm.
the flow of abundant love energy in the
Hmm.
world and around us. Of course, music, is a prime example of being able to immerse in beauty and love and joy and feel it within and around.
Mm.
But so
So you
how to take that experience into the rest of our lives?
Yes. So you just said something quite profound that I'd like to explore even further, and that is the role of all of our feelings in either allowing prosperity or denying prosperity. You just said something that I think our audience could really benefit from, and that is your feelings, your emotions are not only a barometer of your prosperity, but they can be a contributor to the creation of your prosperity. When you uncover feelings that you must release that block prosperity, those feelings are a way shower. They show you how to release and what to release that blocks your prosperity. And when you uncover the feelings of love beneath that, that loving energy is the essence that attracts and allows your prosperity. Did I hear that right, or am I just reading into what you're saying?
Well, Reverend Jim, I feel that that's the relevance of tonight's show, and I
Uh-huh.
I feel another book coming for you on this very topic. The
Mm-hmm.
word triggering can be in the title because
Uh-huh.
it's another missing piece in human understanding. Too
Mm-hmm.
often we feel that uh, good things happen, and then something bad happens. Gosh, where
Yes.
is God when the bad thing happens? And
Uh-huh.
then maybe something good happens, but it seems to be random. And then something else
Mm,
bad happens, and it's all kind of mysterious. But
mm,
you are lifting up the paradox of the quote unquote negative things
mm-hmm,
that within them, if we can open them and allow the contents, you know, allow light to hit the contents within and allow the contents to move and flow out
mm.
and reveal what's hidden underneath, they are an important part of our healing and growth and evolution.
Yes. Fabulous. And thank you for that idea. Because you know what it reminds me of, Reverend Jane? It reminds me of the idea of an internal combustion engine, which means I'd better get this book out soon before people forget what an internal
I,
combustion engine is. But the but the idea of an internal combustion engine is as follows. You put gas in, that gas is consumed. A spark plug creates a spark, which creates energy, which propels the car forward. If you put too much gas in, the engine floods and stalls. If you put too little gas in, the engine doesn't run. It doesn't move the car. So our triggers fuel our growth. So when our trigger comes along, it's like pressing the gas a little bit because that gas and the combustion of the trigger moves us forward. Would that be an accurate way to relay what you just said in a way that people can understand tangibly?
yes, yes. And in fact, I think you do need to write that book, though, because this is such a significant gap in human perception. You know, it's
Yes.
that it's like it seems to me that the central human challenge is, where is God?
Mhm.
God left. It must be because I'm bad.
Mhm.
And there's this core experience of separation. How to bridge that gap? It has to be done in consciousness first, it seems to me, and in understanding. But to bridge that gap in understanding, we have to take what has seemed negative and transform it. And what you're talking about is that step. So please write that book.
Yes, I will, Reverend Jane. And thank you so much for that kind wisdom and encouragement. Thank you. So, we've got so much more to talk about, and I know that our guests have questions. So, in the chat, let us know you're there, say hello to us, and if you have questions or comments that you'd like to share in this discussion, please put them in the chat, and we'll give you a chance to do that. So, we're going to take a break, and we'll be back here on the miracle of prosperity.
Choice, your creative superpower. We have the power to manifest as we dedicate attention to our thoughts, but often miss opportunity to achieve the greatest good. Your superpower is waiting to be unleashed to unlock a fuller, more rewarding world for all. Join us every Thursday at noon Mountain Time for Choice, your creative superpower with Zoe DeMuro.
New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Kitchener, Unity Spiritual Center Ottawa, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Satya Center, Begin Within Ministries, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and the Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for being part of the New Thought Media Network. Please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring.
And we're back here on the Miracle of Prosperity on the New Thought Media Network with Reverend Jane Batt, where we are discussing how our triggers can be a tool that we can use to enhance our prosperity. Now, one of the first triggers that we discussed, which is common to all, is the way that our family relationships can trigger us. Now, Reverend Jane, are there some other things that have triggered you in a way that have caused you to enhance your prosperity?
Yes, and I think in the broad sense, this is universal too. Everyone deals with this one way or another, but loss of a loved one, loss of a job, a home, any loss.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of years ago, I went through the experience of losing a beloved animal companion. A lot of people go through that. And it was surprisingly painful and deep. And yet, looking back on it from some distance, I can see that I learned about God through that. And I used things that you had taught us in your classes, Reverend Jim, because a phrase that you use, and you mean this in the most respectful way, but you have said, if at first you don't succeed, cuss God out.
Mm-hmm.
And this means no disrespect, but the insight within that phrase is God is so loving and loves us so much that even if we have a tantrum, even if we get angry, disappointed, and despairing, and are mad at God about it, God does not just give that a second thought. God's love is always, always, always being poured out to us. So when my beloved cat died, I was cussing God out. I was sobbing, stamping my foot, and cussing God out on a regular basis for days and days and weeks. And it was so painful, but so honest. And the fact that in your classes you had sort of given permission to let it all hang out was so supportive to me at that time, because I just poured out the pain from my heart. And because I allowed that pain to flow out, I was able to heal and not just carry it and stay with it and tighten up around it and close up around it. So my prayer was, Mother, Father, God, please help me keep my heart open and not close my heart around this. Please
Mm.
help me feel your love and learn about your love through this and not give up on your love through all this. And that healing continues to this day.
Mhm.
And miracles have followed from it. And
Yes.
growth, growth has come through it.
Mm. So in other
So
words,
this is
Reverend
one of the
Jane.
ways that it's like grief, the process of grief. That there are
Mhm.
many books about that, and I'm glad that it's way more open than when I was a kid in the 50s.
Yes.
So there are processes for that, and there's more support for that, and there are support groups for that. And that, to me, is another important element of the evolution of human consciousness.
Mhm. Yeah, wow. So if I hear you correctly, your heart broke open. And when your heart broke open, you used the trigger of the loss of your pet and the broken heart that it caused you to identify as a way to open to more of the divine healing love as a balm, as a healer, to give you a sense of peace. Is that accurate?
Yes, yes, it took time. It took time.
Yes.
But but then this mysterious peace has come into my heart since then
Mhm.
and is more easily accessible. But it was
Mhm.
like that proof that if I show God my despair of God, God's
Mhm.
love is even more present, comes in even more. So it's really a miracle, as you say,
Mm.
with a change in perception, a change in understanding.
Yes. And it sounds like you did something to facilitate this process by creating an internal permission and support structure and utilizing an external permission and support structure for your release. Would you like to tell our viewers a little bit more about how you developed and what type of permission and support structure you allowed in order to use your triggers for growth?
Well, fortunately, I was in one of your classes at the time, Reverend Jim, and
Mhm.
and not everyone has this. Not everyone has such a supportive group of spiritual people who they can express and share these things with. But I was able to sob and uh, explain and express things to my classmates in a way that there was a profound release, and I just could feel it in my chest. It was like a bucket pouring out
Mm.
a bucket of water
Yeah.
on the floor, and it just transformed my experience, my feeling of my grief from
Mhm.
one stage to another.
And you found that your external support structure that was a mirror of your internal support structure, which was you giving yourself permission to release because you understood the power of releasing when you were triggered. It sounds like that external support structure was extremely helpful for your growth and your healing. Is that accurate?
Yes, and um, I mean, I recommend Reverend Jim's classes to everyone. and and if there's anything like that in your network or your community, I strongly recommend spiritual groups that are integrated with emotional awareness. So not
Yes.
just the air quality, but the water and the earth and the fire, well-rounded, holistic, and grounded in our human experience, so that we can feel the results of our sharing.
Yes. In other words, give yourself permission internally and externally, to use your triggers for healing in a way, with a group, and in an energy that is supportive, understanding, patient, and respectful of this part of the process. Because one of the things that I found that has been fascinating is how, because I do a lot of coaching, I do a lot of client work, I do a lot of readings, I do a lot of counseling. And one of the things that I found is that so many people tend to look at growth as intellectual and theoretical. And then when something happens in life that triggers them, they're befuddled because they thought intellectually they had dealt with that. They thought that intellectually they had the answer. But the missing link was the emotional body and healing the emotional body, because the emotional body is the part of us that creates. And
Exactly.
you can think and
Exactly.
you can affirm and you can think and you can theorize all you want, but whatever it is within you is what is going to create what is in your outer world. Can you talk a little bit more about the importance of healing the emotional body, and how being triggered is an invitation to heal that emotional body? Can you
Mm,
talk a little bit more about that, Reverend Jane?
absolutely. And one of my favorite quotes is from Carl Jung, one of the
Mhm.
founders of modern psychology. He
Yes.
says, to heal is really to make the unconscious conscious. And our bodies, our emotional bodies, contain a lot of unconscious energy. And as long as it remains unconscious, it jumps out from behind the door and scares us or brings us
Yes.
pain or brings us painful events or frustrations.
Mhm.
And it's embarrassing to open that door and say, okay, I see that you're a part of me. Come on out, come on out. Tell me all about it. Let me get to know you. Let me learn that you're a part of me and that I can work with you and we can transform. But right now, you're just pissed off and impatient and frustrated, and you're blaming six other people for what you're going through.
Yes.
It's uh, projection awareness of our projections is an embarrassing path to the light,
Mm.
but it
Yes.
works. It works,
And let's unpack that
but
a little bit more.
it requires that allowing that and those waves of embarrassment to wash through
Yes.
us, and then
Yes.
pursuing the integration of our unconscious aspects.
Yes. And the part of us that is embarrassed is the false ego, that image that we believed we had to project in order to, quote, get, end quote, of respect, support from the universe. And that part of us is embarrassed because its flaws, frailties, and errors are put on display. Can you talk a little bit more about the ego's embarrassment, and why uh, facing those ego embarrassments are important for our healing and our prosperity? Because prosperity is simply healing and is simply the result of healing.
Yes.
Okay.
So just recently, I've been looking back over a couple of romantic relationships I had when I was in my 30s.
Uh-huh.
And for some decades between then and now, I was blaming the other person. Well, it
Yes.
it was his it was obviously his fault.
Yes.
Obviously it was his fault because he was
Mhm.
like this and he was like that, and obviously it's all his fault. As I go through this commitment to becoming conscious of my projections, lo and
Mhm.
behold, I discover the embarrassing truth that I co-created those relationships. I
Mm.
chose those relationships for my own reasons.
Mhm.
And then, as you say, going into those reasons,
Mhm.
first I feel embarrassment, but
Mhm.
as I persevere, I
Mhm.
come to understand more and have a little compassion for myself as I take responsibility, but also forgive myself
Mm.
for how I co-created those relationships. So that feels like a whole nother level to be at with that.
Yes. And you said something very important that I'd like to unpack a little bit more. That you intimated this, and I want to make sure I heard it right. To take responsibility is not to take blame, but is to recognize the error in your unconscious pattern and to be in forgiveness with yourself because it was simply an error. A Course in Miracles says we blame ourselves, beat ourselves up, castigate ourselves, withhold from ourselves, deny ourselves, and hurt ourselves when the universe says you simply made a mistake. That mistake is corrected. Dust the Shake the dust off your feet and keep moving. Don't stay in the quicksand of your mistake. Shake the dust
Mhm.
off your feet and keep moving. Now, of course, I'm mixing metaphors. Part of it is the wisdom of A Course in Miracles. Another part of it is an instruction that Jesus gave. Shake the dust off your feet and keep moving. And but what you shared was so important for our audience that I feel like it's important to underline it. Taking responsibility is not taking blame or saying it's my fault that I did all of this to myself. It is saying it is taking power. It is realizing I had the power to create this mess, which I judge to be a mess. But what that really means is I have that same power to create something wonderful and gorgeous and beautiful, empowering and joyful. So why don't I take that power and create something different? Why don't I just shake the dust off my feet and keep moving? Why don't I just recognize this was a mistake? And now that I have
Mhm.
embraced the truth, I will create with the truth something glorious. Did I hear that right, Reverend Jane?
You did, you did. And you're absolutely right that it's a temptation to then just get stuck in the set. It's like, oh, I was blaming them. Now I'll blame myself.
Yeah.
Bam, bam, bam. And I can do that for as long as I choose to do that.
Yes.
And then if I get tired of that, I
Hmm.
can choose to become aware, again,
Hmm.
consciously aware that
Yeah.
I'm doing it to myself
Yes.
and say, okay, I open to love's presence in this. I open to
Yes.
further healing with this. I can I can continue with my healing. And
Mm.
rather than stay in this different different level of causing myself suffering, I can
Hmm.
let go of this also and come into a new place of co-creation and, as you say, empowerment.
Yes, exactly. And I have a graphic that a dear friend shared with me recently. I wish I could recreate this graphic right now, but I can't. So I'll try to verbally describe this graphic. This graphic was the graphic of a little kid, their head was sideways, and there was a boot
Mhm.
on the side of their head. And it was a close up of the little kid with a boot on the side of their head. And the
Mhm.
caption was, My Perspective of Life Before Enlightenment. And all you could see was the kid's head and the boot on the side of the kid's head, standing on the side of the kid's head. And then in the next frame of this graphic, the camera panned back from that kid's face. And what you see
Mhm.
then is you see the kid, you see the boot on the side of their head,
Mhm.
but as the camera
Mhm.
panned back, you see that the boot was on the kid's hand, and the boot was literally the kid putting the boot on their own head. And it was fascinating to me. And that was my perspective after enlightenment. I've been doing this to myself. Why am I doing
Exactly.
this to myself? I don't need to do this to myself.
Exactly,
If I can
exactly.
put a boot on my head, I can lift myself up with that same power. And that
Exactly,
was
exactly.
fascinating.
Yeah.
And
And
Mignon,
you know,
go ahead.
yeah,
Go ahead.
to be you know, to be totally honest and transparent here.
Uh-huh.
Forgiving myself is harder than lightening up on the other people.
Mm. Why do
That's
you
a
think
work
that
in
is?
progress.
Yeah. Why do you think that is, Reverend Jane? Is it habitual muscle memory of self-blame? Is it habitual muscle memory of self-blame, self-doubt because of it has been so layered over in our human consciousness?
That sounds likely, Reverend Jim. That sounds quite logical and possible.
Mm, yeah. It's like any deeply ingrained habit, it's your first reflex. And we can interrupt any deeply ingrained habit that is our first reflex by habitually creating another energy pattern through meditation, through prayer, and through the release that interrupts old patterns and creates new patterns. So that we create a new habit of taking a breath, so that we create a new habit of feeling light and love's presence, so that we create a new habit of calling out for light and love's presence. So we make a new pattern of, as Mignon said, saying, I could choose peace instead of this. And that becomes our new pattern that becomes ingrained in our spiritual muscle memory. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is. And it also reminds me of another point that I would love to make, which is
Yes.
I've been working on this on self-healing since 1972. And
Mhm.
part of what has evolved uh, over many years is a lifestyle that is loving to myself, that
Mhm.
is supportive to myself, that is, so it's like the music, the amount of news I watch, whose news I watch, um,
Mhm.
the many practices, the yoga classes, the groups, the classes of different kinds, the work I do is is all has elements that are supportive to me and give back to me as I share with community. And so it's I have forgiven myself that much, and that's
Yes.
quite a lot.
Absolutely. And Reverend Jane, due to your extensive internal self work, how would you describe your life now versus then in terms of many of the elements of prosperity that we often discuss?
Often nirvana,
Mm,
quite a bit quite a bit, often bliss,
mm,
off regularly on a regular basis peace.
mm.
And yet, it's not a done deal. It's like in motion. But
Yes.
as you are affirming, there are
Hmm.
so many tools now. I mean, on the internet, if you are retired or if you're working part-time or even if you're working full-time, you could spend the entire rest of your time getting spiritual guidance of many and support of all kinds.
Hmm.
It's and guidance in emotional release. There's sound healing and movement healing and qigong classes and yoga classes, and so that to embrace all that, to allow yourself to receive that, generates a lifestyle that has its own momentum of self-healing. And then
Yes.
you can't help but share that with your community and the world. I mean, you can't help but share that with your family, your friends, your work buddies, your communities, and the world.
Yes, absolutely. So, just to paraphrase what you said, my life seemed like a living hell, and now it's largely a nirvana of heaven. Would that be accurate?
That would be accurate, yes. Yes.
Okay.
In brief, hell
Yes.
to quite heavenly.
What a wonderful transformation. Now, you said one other thing that I'd like to unpack a little bit more. You said that you've
Mm.
been working on this for decades. I want to also add something else or put an additional perspective on this because what you've experienced over these decades is a quickening. Now, how does that quickening affect our ability now to transcend and to use our triggers and to propel us forward more rapidly and more effortlessly than ever before? Can you speak about
Yes,
that?
absolutely. Because, and you've seen this too, Reverend Jim, even though you're a youngster. um, but in the 70s and the 80s, there was no internet. There were no
Mhm.
online classes and this and that and interviews and spiritual uplift. There was no internet. There were
Mhm.
books. There were some books. There were some groups. There were some people. Um, but the way that these awarenesses, these healing insights, this healing understanding is going towards mainstream.
Mhm.
You can find so much of it that you do not have time to connect with it all. And everyone's growth is accelerating. So I watch young people who are building on what my generation started in the 60s and 70s. I watch them coming in. I watch young women coming in more empowered. I watch young men coming in, being different fathers, carrying their babies in the snugglies to the grocery store. I watch couples relating in whole new egalitarian ways. I watch people just starting at a different place, and then, to be esoteric, to be mystical, the energy on the earth plane now is just faster and blossoming in certain ways. And even though part of what's coming up, and this is a big paradox, is turmoil and inner darkness coming to light, I often liken it to throwing up on the kitchen table.
Mhm.
If you throw up on the kitchen table, it's not pretty, but
Mhm.
better out than in.
Amen.
Better, better. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. Better the shit hitting the fan than not, because you want these issues you want light to hit these issues, and you want these issues to unfold and come to light so that
Yes.
they can be healed, even things that are
Yes.
thousands of years old, hundreds of years old.
Mhm. Reverend Jane, you are an amazing teacher, an amazing mystic, an amazing spiritual leader, and an amazing light. And one of the things that popped into my consciousness today was your shirt. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, yes. So after 9/11, an interfaith group created a hike every September. And so my shirt says praise well with others, and it has the symbols of about 8 different religious traditions on it. So the idea is unity.
Mm,
People from different religious traditions can collaborate, cooperate, find common ground, and find human unity. And so I love this shirt so much because it represents that truth and that consciousness.
yes. And one of the other things that you have done in your own ministry has been to be a purveyor of hope by collecting information that can give us hope and look at the bright side of everything and document humanity's evolution and healing versus the news, which documents uh, humanity's self destructive tendencies. Do you want to say a little bit about that? Because that seems to be one of the things you're working on these days.
Yes. So I've been doing this for about 40 years, and I've collected information about hope and a hopeful future for humanity, not because I've always been totally confident that it's totally there, but because I have worried. To
Mm,
heal my worry, I have
mhm,
sought out and collected hope on many, many human issues. And it is there. But
mm,
Reverend Jim, as you say, it's not always reported on in the media.
mhm,
God bless reporters; they have a difficult job. They're trying to do what they feel is relevant, but at the
mhm,
same time, they leave out so much positive inspiration, innovation, inventions, legal
mhm,
progress, huge, not just small, wonderful stories, but tremendous, wonderful stories. People planting millions and millions of trees, people, you know, releasing uh, animals from extinction, people
mm.
doing, just myriad of constructive, passionate, long-term effort. And you can find it now because, thank God for the internet.
Yes.
You can Google good news and it
Mhm.
will come to you.
Yes. Wonderful. So you've been working on this wonderful project for quite a while, and we thank you for that. You're working on some wonderful things. Thank you for all the work that you're doing and all the things that you're working on. Yes,
Thank you so much.
absolutely. And I'm
And
working on
what
a
are you
couple
and what
things
are
too.
you and what are you working on nowadays, Reverend Jim?
Well, nowadays, Reverend Jane, I'm working on a few things. We've been spending time talking about triggers, right? So I've got a new pop-up class this coming Thursday, uh, on the 11th of April, entitled What to Do When You Are Triggered. It's a set of spiritual tools and techniques that we can all use so that when our triggers come up, we can use our triggers to propel us forward. It's a pop-up class, which means it's an impromptu class. It's one time, and it's from 7:30 to 9:30 that evening. That's this coming Thursday, April 11th, and it's on Zoom. So no matter where you are, you can be a part of this class and be a part of this community of healing. And if you can't make it live and interactively, you can get the recording because it's on Zoom and it will be recorded. And if you choose to take the class, you will also get the recording for additional reference. So this class gives you new tools and techniques so that you can, instead of causing your triggers to trigger you into a downward spiral, you can use your triggers to move into an upward spiral. And that's what this one-time pop-up class is all about. I've got a couple of other classes that are 6-week classes, and they begin on the 15th and the 18th of April. I've got a class called Ask Spirit Anything. And this satisfied a need that many of my clients and many in my global spiritual community, because remember, folks, this is not only for people local to us, this is online, so it is available globally. But this global community of love we call the Tacoma Metaphysical Chapel, many times people have all kinds of random questions that they want to ask Spirit. So I channel these spiritual beings. And these spiritual beings provide insights, guidance, wisdom, healing, prayers, uh, techniques that are practical in nature as well for how to deal with anything. So you ask the questions, Spirit gives you the answers, Spirit gives you the healing, Spirit gives you the tools and techniques. And everybody that asks a question, they ask not only their question, but they ask your question too. So we might get 10 or 12 questions in a session, and they're the questions that everybody has had. So even if you don't ask a question, you get your questions answered. And this is called Ask Spirit Anything, beginning on April 15th. So once you finish your taxes, you might have some questions for Spirit. April 15th at 7:30. And I'm doing a companion class to that on Thursdays, beginning April 18th, called You Can Heal Your Life. You can heal your life. If there is something in your life that you want to bring more balance, more healing, more peace, more joy, more love to, you can bring it to this class. And through discussion, through support, through coaching, counseling, and I just might as well just tell you, Spirit's going to channel some stuff for you as well in that class. I'm going to tell you that up front. Uh, you will get from Spirit the tools you need to heal. So these are companion classes, meaning that they're two for the price of one. Now, I've got a $50 discount on these classes. It's called an early bird special. But that early bird special ends at midnight tonight. So these classes are available to you. If you want to get the discount, you must pre-register and prepay by 9 p.m. There's my number. That's the number you use on PayPal or Zelle or on Cash App or Venmo to prepay. My website is up there too, which gives you ways to get into the classes or get more description of the classes. So there are a number of tools that you can use, and these all support you on your journey to prosperity. So that's what I'm working on these days. So I want to thank our viewers tonight for your presence, your participation. I want to thank our very special guest, Reverend Jane Batt. Thank you so much, Reverend Jane.
Thank you.
And I wish everyone peace, love, and prosperity. Good night from the New Thought Media Network.